ذريتهم بإيمان ألحقنا بهم ذريتهم وما ألتناهم من عملهم من شيء كل امرئ بما كسب رهين.
And those who believed and whose descendants followed them in faith, we will join with them their descendants, and we will not deprive them of anything of their deeds. Every person, for what he earned, is retained.
Parenting is not just about telling your children what's right, it's about showing them. Join us every Wednesday between 9 and 10 a.m. for Love Your Kids, a heartfelt and honest series on Islamic parenting, building strong bonds with your children and creating homes where tough conversations are welcome and love is the foundation. We'll explore how to raise children in line with Islamic values, what it means to lead by example, how to open communication between parents and kids, tackling hard topics with compassion and honesty. Whether you're a parent, guardian, or mentor, this show is for you because our children don't follow what we say, they follow what we do. Love Your Kids only on Radio Islam International, Wednesdays 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Don't miss it.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Radio Islam International. We are doing the program Love Your Kids, the third season, the 9th episode. Now, we discussed the importance of parents fulfilling the responsibilities of developing the child, tarnishing it all starts in the first school of learning, that is the home. We also mentioned all about how the different scenarios that we have at home. We have Manazir Ahmad Ragi online. Manana, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Marana, and to all our listeners on Radio Islam, Radio Ansar, on Mahad platform. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
While we were discussing about, the importance of parents fulfilling the responsibilities of developing the child, and we also mentioned that the first school of a child is at home, mostly with the mother. And we also discussed about how parents, single parents raising the kids, and all these were discussed. Now to assist our parents, can we address some of the myths that are related to our children? Can we relate some of the myths that relate to children? If we can identify and address some of these. So some of the myths that relate to challenges. Like, for example, we have the myths of the good bad boy.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Yes, Marana, there are a few myths that I would like to address. Some of them, like the myth of the good bad boy, the myth that love by itself preserves a child's natural goodness, the myth of expert knowledge that always right and never wrong, moral problems of psychological problems, the myth that parents do not have the right to instill their values in their children, especially in today's times, the myth of the single parent family being just as good as the two-parent family, and a pure secular family as best example to follow. Now, these are some of the myths that especially young parents today may face these challenges. Many a times you have that children are left with the nannies to be looked after, and there are certain challenges that may come up, and I want to address some of these myths as you have identified, Maulana. So the first one that you spoke of is the myth of, or the misconception of a good bad boy, a good bad boy. Now, the word good bad already, should raise alarms. Sometimes we hear this, he's a good bad boy. Now, bad boys or children are portrayed as lovable and happy. When kids are young and when they are naughty, many a times these boys are portrayed as lovable, they are portrayed as happy. Now, I want to talk a little, very, very little, just give a reflection, and parents may think about it and reflect about it. We don't have all the answers, as we've said, but just reflect on what we are saying. Now, many a times, we leave our kids, it used to be in the past in front of the TV station. But today, we have the handheld devices, our iPhones, our smartphones, our iPads, and we just leave the children to be occupied and entertained with this. And this has sometimes a very negative impact. Now, as I've said, bad boys or bad children are portrayed as lovable and happy. Now, we know of the past, we had, and many parents may be able to identify with this, the Tom Sawyer, Buster Brown, two popular characters from the Western storybooks are examples from the past. We also have the example of TV channels that we see, the YouTube channels on our smart devices. Dennis the Menace. The name itself already tells you, Dennis, who? The Menace. Bart Simpson, Little Rascals, and other, I would say it in inverted commas, lovable brats featured in programs, in films, on televisions, on YouTubes, are examples of the present. Now, this tradition has a powerful hold on the imagination of a child, so that the word obedience becomes a dirty word in the child's vocabulary. Many of these programs, many of these YouTube programs that we leave our children to occupy themselves when we are, in the shopping malls, going for shopping, or when we are busy cooking, or we are busy with our own work, give the child the device and the child goes onto YouTube and watches all these things. What is a very subtle, very, very subtle message that is indoctrinated in the imagination of the child is that the word obedience becomes a dirty word in the child's vocabulary. So as parents, we need to be extremely, extremely careful. Now, there are many other programs that you can watch, and I'm not advocating it, but if they have to, there are good Muslim-orientated programs. And these are things that we can use, storytelling, good storytelling. Another misconception, another myth, that love by itself preserves a child's natural goodness. Now, we do know, we spoke a lot about it, and this program in itself is named as Love Your Kids. However, we need to be very cautious, we need to be very careful, and we need to have the correct balance in expressing our love to our children. So this myth that love by itself would preserve the child's natural goodness. This is the idea conceived by some of the child psychologists, that virtue will take care of itself if children are just allowed to grow in their own way. All that parents need to do is love their children. Love, according to some Western child psychologists, meaning non-interference and complete freedom. And we need to understand that this goes against the grain of Islamic tarbiyah, the Islamic way and the moral way, or rather, I would say the correct way of developing and making tarbiyah and the growth of your child. And as we go along, inshallah, I would like to address this part, and we'll address this part, that if you just say that love your children and the child will automatically grow up to be a good person, you don't have to interfere, provide them complete freedom. This is a myth. And this myth can sometimes be extremely dangerous. It can be extremely dangerous in the development of a good, mature adult. And inshallah, as we go along, inshallah, Maulana, we will discuss this part, because it requires us to understand, when we say love your kids, the balance that has to be maintained in that love. And we spoke about the various types of parenting in the past, And some of that answers were given in the past. Another myth is that myth of an expert knowledge that is always right and never wrong. Always right and never wrong. Parents, unfortunately, for whatever reasons, have abdicated their responsibility of parenting and have deferred to so-called experts, not necessarily experts, so-called experts in raising their children. Now, this happens in many ways. Sometimes when both parents are working and they get the assistance of a nanny or someone, opay, or someone that will come and help them, and they go through a various interview process and they find someone, they say, no, this person is expert, he has lots of knowledge, lots of experience in bringing up children. And that's a myth. We abdicate our own responsibility as parents. We defer this to so-called experts in raising our children. And the majority of child rearing experts subscribe to the above myth of natural goodness. So we have a situation, for example, where one myth supports another. Experts tend to place a great amount of emphasis on the unique, creative, spontaneous nature of children. Many experts in child psychology who are void of the Islamic moral approach of developing your children tend to place great emphasis, or rather too much emphasis, on the unique, creative and spontaneous nature of children. And as parents, you might observe that when your young child is growing up in the home, they have this, they have their own unique, creative and spontaneous nature. In fact, some experts only want parents to adjust themselves to their children. Many Western child psychologists who are void of the Islamic flavor, Islamic backdrop, Islamic background, only want parents to adjust themselves, that parents must adjust to the children rather than parents teaching children to follow rules and obey authority. And this is a myth that allow your children just to grow because they have the expert knowledge, they are already wired to do things, rely on their expert, creative, spontaneous nature, and be happy with that, and don't interfere in the development of your children, rather than parents teaching children to follow rules and obey authority. And this can become extremely dangerous when the child grows up, because that's when you find children not wanting to obey rules, and this becomes difficult at the end. So there's no such thing as parents should not interfere, should not provide the right guidance. I mean, there are many examples, inshallah, as we go along. We'll talk about those examples from the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how parents' continuous observation and adjustment of the behavior of children has been provided by our deen, alhamdulillah. Another myth, and that is, moral problems are psychological problems. Understand this, very important, Maulana, that many a times there is this myth that a moral behavioral problem is a psychological problem. And what do we mean by that? Behavioral problems are seen as problems in self-esteem or the result of something that is not satisfied and unfulfilled psychological need. When we observe that our child is not behaving well, there is a behavioral problem, either at home or either at school. Many a times, this problem is seen as a problem with regards to self-esteem, problem that this child has not been satisfied, not fulfilled by the psychological needs of a child. Many child experts disagree with the idea that most behavioral problems are the result of desires and sheer willfulness on the part of children. That it's only a thing that the child wants, the willful desire of a child. Many books, unfortunately, today are devoted to only the aspects of self esteem, and the word character is not likely to be found anywhere. So many a child's psychological books and many a child psychologist's guidance with regards to parenting puts lots of emphasis on self-esteem and very little is spoken about character. It is worth noting that a study of child rearing articles in many a magazines, in many a books, I mean, nowadays you don't get so many of these magazines. For example, you used to get the books like, likes of the ladies, home journals, women's home companions, good housekeeping magazines. For many years, we found that 1/3 of them were about character development. So in the past, even among Western psychologists, the aspect of character development was given its due importance. Unfortunately, we find today, and in a very subtle way, and we as parents, and especially as Muslim parents, we should be very, very cognizant of this fact. We should be aware of this fact that in a very subtle way, the aspect of character development is being swept under the carpet. There is very little attention given to it, and a lot is being spoken about the self-esteem of a child. Yes, self-esteem is important, and inshallah we will have a full discussion on this aspect. But never let it be undermined. Never let the character development of the child be undermined. Behavioral problems should not only be seen as a psychological problem. A behavioral problem in a child sometimes, or many a times, and perhaps most of the times, is the way that parents have brought the child up. Then there is the myth that parents do not have the right to instill their own values in the children. And this follows up from what we've just been talking. Maulana, again, if you want to come in, please, anytime, even if our listeners want to come in, sometimes we just carry on talking, not realizing that we're on radio. So, interaction is always good, inshallah.
Inshallah. Now, Ma, we do have, we're listening. This is quite an interesting point. Parents do not have the right to instill the values in their children. And this is very much what's happening in today's time, especially with the Western world, Western influence that has come that, you can't discipline your child, or there's certain ways and methods that the Western has shown. So, the way how you discipline your child might not be the correct way. So these are very important myths that we need to debunk. And if the listeners have any input, you can WhatsApp us 072-786-1548. That's 072-786-1548. Now we can carry on.
So this myth that parents do not have the right to instill their own values, and in our case, we're talking of Muslim values in their children. And this follows from the previous one. When we have behavioral problems, we push it under the carpet and we say, no, it's a psychological issue. Now, this part, that parents do not have the right, some people argue that children must create their own values. And this is the current contemporary approach of parenting in the Western world. And they argue this point that children must create their own values. So in the reality, children have little chance to do that. When we say that children must create their own values, the fact of the matter is that in reality, children have very little opportunities. They don't have the capacity. And they have a very small chance to do that, since other people in society want to impose their own values as well. Now, we spoke about the myth of the good bad boy. So if we're saying that they must be allowed to develop their own values, and they are given these devices and these programs to watch, and if they must develop their values from all what is the outside influence, and parents should not interfere in the outside influence of the child, I think this is a very dangerous, very, very dangerous approach. Other people in society have the right to impose their own values as well, and this they do it through very sophisticated means. Does it really make sense for parents to remain neutral bystanders when everyone else, from script writers to entertainers to advertisers to sex educators in schools, insist on selling their own values to children? And this is something that we as young parents and as parents should be extremely, extremely observant, cognizant, and you need to be a present parent. So this myth that children must create their own values is a very subtle way of asking parents to step back from their, firstly, their Muslim responsibilities. And let's ask a very simple question. When we say that they must be allowed to develop their own values, however, society has a free hand to influence the children, does it really make sense for parents to remain absent, for parents to remain neutral, for parents to remain bystanders when everyone else, from cartoonists, from script writers, from YouTubers, from entertainers, to advertisers on billboards, to sex education in school, insist on selling their own values to children? One way of defining values is to think of sins. And we should always regard that what is the value that they are instilling? What is the influence that they are bringing the outsiders? Is it defined as a sin, the actual end result of that value? Is it regarded as a sin indeed? And that's the line that we always need to draw. Another myth, and unfortunately, due to the many high rates of divorces in our communities today, the myth of the single parent family being just as good as the two-parent family. So, we advocate that you have the freedom. If you're not happy, walk out of the marriage. Don't worry of the children. Single parent families are just as good as two-parent families. This is a myth. Character formation is a difficult task. The development of character, akhlaq, is not a simple task. It's a difficult task. Even when we know how to do it, divorce makes character formation much more difficult. And unfortunately, the rate of divorce is very high, and it affects many families. And children from single parent homes are more at risk of falling victim to, unfortunately, drug use, delinquency, emotional problems, and, dare I say, even unwanted pregnancies. Having said this, we do not deny that children from all families are capable of healthy psychological adjustment. There's no doubt about it that if a single parent fulfills their responsibilities correctly, inshallah, those children will be capable of healthy psychological adjustments. There was a British psychiatrist who coined the phrase a good enough mother, meaning that for a child to develop a healthy self, a healthy personality, the mother must be a good enough mother who relates to the child with primary maternal preoccupation. A mother's primary occupation is her motherhood that she provides. And this applies to fathers and mothers too, in both single and two parent families. A caring parent in a single parent family can indeed do a better job of raising children than uncaring parents in a two parent family home. No doubt about it. Furthermore, if a single parent has extended family members helping out and a very friendly family workplace, which is the home, should she work or should he work, may do a better job of parenting than an ignorant parent of a two parent family. No doubt about that. But this myth that a single parent home is good enough is something that we should be very careful of when we opt for divorce and when we opt for separation when there are young children involved. And the last one before we complete today, Morana, the myth of a pure secular family as the best example to follow. The myth that a pure secular family is the best example to follow. And we mention this because, unfortunately, many of our homes, or rather, may I say, some of our homes, unfortunately, are becoming so withdrawn from Islamic moral behavior in the home, are becoming so distant from a religious Muslim home. Now, in the past, even in Western societies, including Jewish, Roman, Greek civilizations of the past, even in the West, during the 18th and 19th centuries, and many grandparents may identify with this, the idea of the sanctity of the home was the rule. In the past, in the early 19th centuries, many of the elderly people may agree and identify with this. The idea of the sanctity of the home was the rule, not the exception. Many rituals or scriptures reading took place in the home, even in non-Muslim homes, which we call a type of ta'aleem. Home life was linked to something larger than itself, to a larger vision and purpose. This twin vision of the family as being sacred in itself and as set within a larger sacred framework, that the home was the sanctity, the home has to be sacred, which resulted in societies and communities to be sacred, and as set with a larger sacred framework, gave added authority to parents. It gave added strength to family bonds. Families that have the loyalty of their children manage to convey a sense that they are engaged in an important work, in continuing a faith, continuing building their faith, a tradition, a craft, or a vision of the way things ought to be. That is why homes were. Many Muslim homes, or all Muslim homes, were in that fashion. Even Western homes, unfortunately, and this is the point that we want to drive, unfortunately, many families today do not stand for anything of that sort. Neither a little ta'leemi halqas in our homes. There is absolutely no governance in our homes, meaning a set of rules. We are more like little hotels and restaurants in our homes. places where one stays temporarily with no particular sense of commitment. In essence, unfortunately, there are some homes today, Muslim homes, that in essence, the values and the ethics of Muslims have been trivialized and marginalized to the extent that everything goes and nothing matters. And that's the very dangerous situation. And I will conclude today's program, Marana. We'll leave a bit early today. As I've said, there is a mashwara that we need to attend. And I will conclude with this, a warning that we need to always keep in mind. Always be aware of the 7 deadly sins. Parents, do yourselves and your home and your children a favor. Always keep in mind, always be aware of the following 7 deadly sins. Number 1, lust. A strong craving for sex, a strong craving for power and control. This is the first of the 7 deadly sins. The first one is lust. Observe, and you yourself as parents, and observe these trends in your child. Is he a victim of this as a result of all these myths that we spoke of and the outside influence? He has a strong craving for sex, a strong craving of power and control. The second sin is gluttony, a habitual greed, excess eating. And then third sin, greed in itself. Now, greed in itself would mean intense, selfish desire for something, especially for wealth, for power and food. So the first one was lust. The second was gluttony. The third, greed. The fourth, very dangerous sin that we need to be aware of is sloth. A habitual disinclination to making an effort, a habitual disinclination to go to work or do some work, just laziness, indifference, negligence in everything, sloth. So again, let's repeat it. Lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, the habitual disinclination to assist in homework, in housework, disinclination to make an effort to work, just sheer laziness, indifference to everything, negligence. And the fifth one is wrath, extreme anger, always putting up a fight, desire to punish someone even for small and trivial issues. Wrath. And many a times this aspect, this wrath, is either developed in a child from the outside influences, and many a times from the influence of the home itself, if one of the parents are guilty of this. Extreme anger, always putting up an argument, the desire to punish, even for small trivial issues. The sixth one is envy, a feeling of discontent, resentful, longing and aroused by other people's possessions and qualities or luck. Now, if you as a parent are guilty of that, your children are going to have that. And this is a deadly sin for the development of good adults. A feeling of discontent of what I have, being resentful of what somebody else have, longing and aroused by other people's possessions or other people's qualities, or just the sheer luck that other people are endowed with. The last one of these seven is pride, a feeling of deep pleasure or satisfaction from one's achievements or achievements of those close to you. So I'll repeat this very quickly. a warning that we as parents should always be observant in ourselves and our children. Keep in mind, always be aware of these 7 deadly sins: lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. Inshallah, may Allah Ta'ala give us the ability and the strength to understand the important responsibilities that Allah Ta'ala has bestowed on our shoulders as parents to develop good, strong, moral adults in our homes.
I mean, Ma, just before we leave, there's 2 messages that is coming. Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah, very inspiring and important program for many going through difficulty in their homes, broken homes for affected children, and loneliness to many adults going through sadness and hardships. Ta'aleem in our homes is so important to a family. Allah reward all with the best of this dunya and akhirah. And another one, Jazakallah khair for such an informative and interesting program. I follow lots of parenting experts on social media and did not realize I was getting convinced to this way of parenting where kids should not account for their character in any way. It is very eye-opening.
Jazakallah. Jazakallah for that.
Jazakallah for that. Inshallah, we'll continue next week, Wednesday.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.